It's my good friend Jack Saba. I think I finally, once for the first time in our 3 years of being friends, said his name correctly publicly. He's very proud. So usually when you have a regulation panel, people say, oh, that's boring. No one's want to hear about that. But when it comes to the blockchain space, this is like the most exciting panel. So with that said, I'm going to let Jack take it over and introduce our panel.
Can I welcome, I'll welcome you guys right up to the stage. And we're looking for Alex and Terrence as well. Jack. Is there a Terrence in the building? All right, apparently not. Pass these mics down. All right, so I'm Jack Saba, CEO of Ledger Atlas. We recently established a special economic zone down in the Pacific where we're going to be formalizing the best practices of initial coin offering. So regulations is something I truly care about. But can we go down the line and introduce yourselves? Who are you with, and what is a common misconception you see when people talk about initial coin offerings?
Sure. Is this on? Hi, I'm Alex Yastrzemski. I'm with Design Zone Solutions. Prior to that, I was with for 4 years with BitFury, where I started as general counsel in 2013. If we're talking about ICOs, I think one of the main misconceptions out there right now is if you're setting out to change the world in the blockchain space, my recommendation as a lawyer in-house for a number of years is to focus on your product, not on the fundraising aspect. If you want to change the world with fundraising, set up a platform for fundraising. If you want to create a blockchain solution, focus on that before you focus on your ICO.
I am not a lawyer, but I do agree with that. And I will also add that they are not easy. Dana Moon, I'm actually replacing Alana Gombert with MetaX. I run revenue and services. So we've been heavily involved in HB70 passings in Wyoming, and then also with the combination of data, the Digital Asset Trade Alliance, which has been heavy on in the White House and DC in that area as well. So we are out to not only decentralize blockchain, but also to spread the word about it and help educate.
Nancy Wojcik from Cooley, I'm a partner there, very much involved in the crypto space. The most common misconception right now is people believing we're still in 2017, and we're not. The token offering, the public token sales in the US pretty much shut down. And that's because the SEC finally decided to provide some guidance in late December.
Excellent, Nancy. So we'll start down with you because I think this is going to touch on a little bit about what you're talking about. So entrepreneurs have this mindset of, I'm going to do what it takes today to get it done, and I'll deal with repercussions tomorrow. And one of the things that they've been doing is skirting the SEC regulations that would define these as securities and calling them a utility. So what is the SEC going to do about those that have already raised on the premise of it being a utility, but it is very much a security?
So first of all, in the SEC's view, all tokens are securities. So when you start with that premise, you have nowhere to go but down. So
well said. Well said.
So in terms of what companies who've already engaged in a public token offering in 2017, and there have been some that have done it in 2018, we just haven't been involved in them. The SEC has a number of investigations pending, and what they're hoping to do is get quick settlements so that they can provide further guidance through settlements. And they do it in a very broad way in settlement order. In terms of people that have not been contacted by the SEC, and there are quite a few of them since, as of last count, there are roughly, 1,600 tokens out there being traded. And what you have to be concerned about is further issuances of those tokens, because that may trip an SEC response. Entering into partnership agreements where you're giving tokens out to your partners who are helping develop your network, or doing airdrops, giving away tokens for free. is, in the SEC's view, a security, and it's an offer and sale of security, and therefore you have to do something for compliance purposes with the SEC. And I'm only talking SEC. We have 4 other agencies that all have skin in the game, and we have 50 states, so we have a very fractionalized regulatory framework in the US. And that's just the US. Then you go international, and it's a bigger issue.
Alex, you want to expand on that?
Sure. I think it's important to keep in mind that there is no jurisdiction that I'm aware of outside of the US or within the US that has a bespoke set of rules and regulations targeting SECs and providing guidelines for compliance. So at the end of the day, you have to weigh your ICO plans with your economic goals. If you're going to be excluding the US, you're pretty much cutting out between 35 and 50% of your potential revenue. However, you would be avoiding entering into a regulatory regime that is not 100% clear. If you are staying outside of the US, you are required to implement certain KYC and anti-money laundering procedures to make sure that you don't inadvertently do a sale to a US purchaser of your tokens. If you do, the SEC rules do apply to you regardless of your efforts to avoid it.
And Diana, you were working with the Wyoming group, the group that brought the regulations into Wyoming that exempts some initial coin offerings from being securities. So can you talk about what that looks like and what are the implications on a federal level?
I can at least, not so much on a federal level, but at least for what that's going to do for our company and then our vertical as well. I mean, that gives us tangibility, right? It gives us the freedom to actually have a voice at the table, which is one of the reasons that we started this in the beginning. We personally have Ad Token, which is powered by AdChain, which is the AdChain protocol, which is written on Ethereum. So getting that situation out there and confirming and sort of proving that we are actually a utility token. Not much to what Nancy said earlier. Like, we are very much in that space and very much in that framework. So we want to make sure that is also is known within the rest of the community, and then we also uphold that for everyone else as well as a standard. As these guys have both alluded to, there are no precedents. We are sort of I don't want to say the blind leading the blind, because that's not a fair statement, but in some cases it is.
And Nancy, you talked about how we're not in 2017 anymore. So how has the evolution of the thought process around initial coin offerings and ICOs developed, both internally at your law firm and then how you guys are interacting with the SEC?
So how we've evolved is, as soon as the SEC actually decided to provide a little guidance, we dialed back our clients who had plans for the first quarter 2018 to do a public token sale. And I don't use the term ICO. I find it objectionable. It triggers responses at the SEC. So I'm trying to create, conversions of new terminology.
And what's the terminology you support?
I say public token sale, or in the event of an airdrop, a token generation event, just something other than something that leaps to mind, initial public offerings in the context of securities. So we, contacted all our clients and explained to them what was going on and how we evolved, because our clients are still raising money, and they're raising significant amounts of money. But we're doing it on the pre-sale side and providing a longer runway for them to develop their network. And at that point in time, hopefully the SEC will provide a framework by which public token sales can occur in the US. I don't agree with the SEC that the current regime, which was developed in the 30s, really has any relevance to blockchain technology and cryptocurrency offerings. It was a surprise to the SEC in one of our meetings with them that what we're talking about are trades going on in milliseconds versus closing in effect. In milliseconds, you could see the light bulb kind of go on in their mind. So there's a small industry group. When the chair, well, let me step back. In December and January, the chairman of the SEC decided to go on a PR junket where he just talked about the fact that he's never seen a token offering that wasn't a security. He privately told us that Bitcoin is a security. So it's like, you know, what are we dealing with here? So he suggested that an industry group be formed to perhaps, you know, provide some help to the SEC. And he's been making that offer to a variety of people because they're in a learning mode right now. So we're part of an industry group, 2 VCs, 3 law firms, and 2 academics. And we're trying to be helpful to the SEC in their process of analyzing token offerings.
So Alex, it sounds like there's a push that can be done on our side of things. How do you think that the community should move forward and start to engage? Should it be through the law firm? Should it be as a community working with a startup? How do you think we should move forward and shape the landscape?
I think self-regulatory organizations are popping up left and right. We have academics and law firms and service providers providing one viewpoint. We also have entrepreneurs working in token generation events and other alternatives to ICOs, trying to lay out a groundwork which is, at least on its surface, compliant with the regulations. The problem with self-regulatory organizations is that they may or may not be aligned with the community around a particular blockchain product. So if you have a blockchain solution that is targeting a certain microcosm of the digital ecosystem, do you then reach out to academics and law firms? Do you reach out to other entrepreneurs, or do you self-regulate based on the goals and principles of your target ecosystem? At this point, I think most SROs are looking to be useful, are looking to advise, are looking to set guidelines for their community. But I think it's important to keep in mind that those communities can be vastly different from one another.
I would also just lead by example as well. I mean, regulation in that word, I think it's needed in some shape and form. But you know, if you're a good actor, then you're in the right. So you know, if you are being a bad actor and you don't want somebody to quote unquote look under the hood, then you should be regulated.
Can you expand on this a little bit? What are some of the best practices for participating in being proactive and leading the way?
Best practices. I mean, if you walk the walk, then you know, talk the talk. It's being very transparent with with what the token has generated to date, how it's being disseminated, how it's being used in the space, and then again follow that up. There are a lot of, I think, companies out there that have started down the good path and then maybe have pivoted for whatever reason. So again, leading by example. And keeping everything very transparent, and you're just staying true to what you've said and promised to your whether it's your shareholders, token holders, whatever, in the first place, and then you'll be able to look yourself in the mirror at night, hopefully.
Hopefully. So Terrence has joined us on this panel. Can you provide a quick introduction, and what are some misconceptions you see when dealing with people going through initial coin offerings?
Sorry I'm late, everyone. So I'm Terrence Yang. I worked on Wall Street as a securities lawyer, a deal manager, and business development, which is really sales, in securities, asset-backed securities, CDOs, credit default swaps, and so forth. So the biggest misconception I would say that people have about ICOs is that you can still do them and get clean legal opinions or should opinions from US law firms that are reputable. When I worked on Wall Street, we used the best law firms and the best lawyers, in my opinion, and risk managers and so forth. And we never sold any credit default swap or CDO to any US retail investor ever. CDOs and CDS, credit default swaps, are obviously problematic with the models, right? And cause a lot of damage, unfortunately. But the people that lost money included Wall Street banks themselves. I remember traders being fired because they wouldn't ramp up risk. But when you have ICOs, which are often innovative, but it also looks like a way for founders, PR firms, promoters, and pre-sale investors to dump on US retail, that is not good. It's not gonna work. So after Thanksgiving and Christmas, when everybody started asking their relatives, millennials and folks like us in the room, how to buy, I'll finish up in 1 minute, how to buy ICOs and Bitcoin, all of a sudden you have US Main Street investors who probably don't have a lot of business buying this stuff, doing it, and the valuation went up to over 800 billion market cap, and the SEC got heavily involved.
So we'll stay with you for a second here, Terrence. So you spent a lot of time on Wall Street. You've seen all these different types of securities and obviously have dealt with regulators in all those capacities. How are these tokens not resembling securities in the traditional form?
Okay, so still making the argument that these tokens are not securities. In theory, if these tokens that are utility tokens, well, let's start with that. If you're actually using them for a good or service, exchanging the token for a good or service, then that works, right? Why are Starbucks gift cards, virtual gift cards, not securities? Because when you buy a Starbucks gift card for $10 and you have 10, whatever points or however they do it, you can exchange it for a latte or whatever, and that doesn't go up and down in value a lot, and people aren't buying it to speculate. If you're selling it, if you're genuinely doing like what we call a bona fide transaction or transaction in good faith, and it's going to the people that are intended to use these utility tokens, you should be advertising where they are. So if coffee lovers go to a coffee site, you advertise your coffee token. You don't go to Telegram and create channels and pump your token, right? That doesn't look like a utility token to me. That looks like a security. So those can be, in theory, utility tokens can be not actually done in a way that is not a security, but as SEC Chairman Clayton said recently, he has not seen, and I have not seen, our panelists, my co-panelists may know better, but he and I and others have not yet seen a utility token in practice that is not a security. All these ICO utility tokens are look like securities to us.
Is that because they are doing the initial coin offering at the point where their token doesn't actually have utility?
That's part of it, and I think like it's because the people buying them, in all honesty, are betting that price will go up. That's why they're buying it. It's not because they really want to exchange their token for the good or service that's being allegedly offered. So,
Nancy, you have something to add?
So, Terrence, I have to comment on a couple things that you've said. So, the 2008 crisis that evidently you participated in.
Unwittingly.
The comment about you not selling to retail investors, you did sell to mutual funds, you did sell to municipalities, you did sell to public companies, all of whom the base people are retail investors. So I think kind of the comment that you made, you weren't selling to them, is just not quite right. Secondly, part of blockchain and cryptocurrency is the democratization of investing. Just like crowdfunding was designed to allow somebody other than venture firms to participate in these emerging companies who have terrific technology and or have plans to save the world. And that's all part of the blockchain, I think, mentality. All the entrepreneurs that are out there trying to do this in a legitimate way, and there's certainly bad actors out there. I don't mean to say that everybody's perfect out there, but we have to somehow come to terms with how to rationalize these securities laws. You were out of the room when I mentioned this. They were developed in the 30s. They don't have application to what we are all doing right now. And however, the SEC has raised their hand and said, hey, we're kind of in charge. And a rationale that I hear that people are saying why the SEC is so worried about this is, oh, gee, they're going to get blamed if there's a crisis. Well, don't raise your hand. You know, so there are other agencies. There's the FTC, who I think is legitimately a decent agency to deal with the CFTC. And we're meeting with all of those. We're meeting with Department of Treasury. My personal view, we need a new agency. We need to remove from each of the agencies who believe they have skin in this game into one agency or one self-regulatory agency that is empowered through legislation, not just, we formed a group and we're going to try to self-regulate. To me, that makes the most sense. The problem we have is we have an administration that's not really going to support a new agency. Secondly, we're about to have a midterm election fairly soon, and if the Democrats do take over, my fear is we are going to see a lot more challenges to blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, because the legislators we're meeting with in the Capitol, we have some open minds, we have some firmly supportive, but we have a lot of people out there, and they're primarily Democratic for some reason. And I think at that point, our centralized hoarders of information are going to start funding these things to try to get rid of crypto.
I think Terrence wants a moment to respond.
Yeah, just on the narrow point of, yes, we did sell to mutual funds, pensions, and so forth. However, that was done through managers who are professionals and are supposed to be experts. And their job, right, is to protect, whether it's CalPERS or TIAA or whatever, to protect the funds that they're managing. That's their job. Our job was to sell to them and provide proper disclosure, which we did. The problem with ICOs is they violate a lot of them violate the 10b-5 rule under the SEC because they omit material information.
So Nancy touches on this a little bit. The SEC is not the only player in the room. So Alex or Diana, what other regulatory bodies should be keeping up entrepreneurs at night?
I think we mentioned a few, the FTC, the CFTC. I think the most timely one right now is the IRS. At this point,
Hope everyone filed.
at this point, if you haven't filed or for an extension, just along the SEC regulations that make it impossible to know at what point your tokenized security is no longer a security and can be validly deemed to be a utility token. We don't know at this point what are the thresholds for an IRS audit based on your token or crypto sales. Good luck.
It's Dana, actually.
Sorry, I apologize.
Diana. I was like, is there a Diana here? No, Terrence, I just actually want to go back to your comment about the security and the utilities. I can say with 100% confidence that anyone that has an ad token in their hand, an ad token, and you might have mentioned this earlier, powers ad chain registry. An ad chain registry is a decentralized whitelist for ad tech. I guarantee you they do not have that token to get rich. We are giving a voice to people in ad ops, to people that deal with fraud. And the balances are the bad actors of the ad tech world on a daily basis, so that they can come in and actually vote these bad actors out and try to chip away at that billion-dollar fraud. But I just wanted to, I couldn't let you get out of the room with that.
No. May I ask, did you guys ICO that token?
Yes.
Okay, and did you use a great law firm like Cooley, or did it help you, or how did you guys get comfortable with the legal?
We do have a law firm.
Okay. And you guys got a legal opinion, I hope.
Sorry?
Did you guys get a? I'm just curious.
Yes. No,
All right, so I'm gonna
legal
love to see it.
opinions. Wait a minute. If you've got a legal opinion, I'm pretty impressed.
Off the record.
This is a really gray area. Do not expect a legal opinion on anything.
So I'm gonna toss out here, changing pace, a little bit of a softball, but a little out there. We only have 3 minutes left, so we'll go down the line with this one. moving forward, how can we use the blockchain to reduce the need for regulations?
Okay, so I think a killer app for blockchain here would be to take advantage of the fact that blockchain is permanent, public, uncensorable. So it's something related to that, where things are very transparent and open, and people can't change the record, and that could somehow reduce the need for regulation, I think.
Going back to something I started with, at this point, if you have a blockchain technology that is operating on that originally operated on an API system in compliance with regulations, you will be in a better place tokenizing and putting that API system technology onto the blockchain for greater functionality, and you will be pushing the regulators to find an issue with why you could do it on an API system, but you cannot do it on a blockchain system.
I would go back to the actual consensus mechanism and registries in general, because you are rewarding the good actors that are continuing to allow themselves to be good, and in terms of regulation, I believe that they're regulating themselves. And then they're also getting an opportunity to get the bad actors out. That's probably not as technical as an answer as going the API route, but just in terms of decentralization in nature is, I think, just the path forward regardless.
I think blockchain does that already because it provides such a wealth of information about the trades that are going on that the regulators can use to see whether or not somebody is acting in a bad way. That, I think, again, it's a complicated issue for the regulators and they have to learn about it. So to the extent you participate in conversations with regulators, it helps. And
Could not agree more in terms of education. I think people fear change, and they fear what they don't know. I mean, the dollar exists because, well, there are various reasons why the dollar exists, but we don't have time for that. But yeah, I mean, change is inevitable. It has to come.
Thank you guys so much.
Well, so at this point, lunch is served, so anybody that wants to stick around and do some Q&A, those are your two options. So happy to keep the panel here if you guys want to do, but yeah, just want to, there are some questions, so I'll be your runner. And do you have time to stick around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Terrence, I want to say I totally agree with you. I don't go buy BART tickets if I'm not going to ride on BART, right? Because anybody else buys it, it's speculation. I have a question for you because we're facing this issue right now. I'd like to separate the pre-sale aspect from token issuance from the public sale, as Nancy will bring it up. Pre-sale, of course, we've done it with SAF from a major law firm. It is essentially a securities document, and it's the right to buy the tokens, right? And we've included everything in it that these guys can never sell that contract to anybody else, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that I've heard is you can issue the tokens, but now you have to comply with Rule 144, which means for 12 months, these tokens cannot be sold or exchanged with anyone. Of course, there's regulation 4A7 that allows accredited investors to trade these things, but let's forget about that. There's a company that's formed, Harbor.com. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. What they've done is they've built timer into the token. So for 12 months, it's not going to do that. Would that allow us to continue to issue tokens and have the 12-month waiting period? So by that time, the regular, ordinary people will have sufficient information about your platform being operational, et cetera, and hopefully, so it's all treated as security.
So right now, the answer is we don't know. We are running those scenarios by the SEC. Again, they haven't provided any guidance in the area. Rule 144 has some other requirements in there with respect to, other than just the vesting period or the holding period. So don't know yet. We're hoping to get no action letters from them. It's a process by which you present a fact situation to them, and they'll say, okay, we're not going to refer you to enforcement. So that's as far as they go as to blessing something. So we're hoping to bring them along gradually. We're hoping that process will work
given the amount of capital that's flowing into these crypto markets, if the regulatory burden in this jurisdiction becomes, and it appears to be becoming increasingly difficult and burdensome, do you see the flow simply moving to other nations? I mean, the Binance case is a perfect example of this. You shut it down and it pops up in another friendly jurisdiction.
It's already happening. So I was at a panel in the audience, like you all, at Stanford, where someone in the audience said to an SEC lawyer who was on the panel, why are you guys so strict? Because I'm an accredited investor, said the person in the audience, not me. And I can't get any tokens because they're all going offshore. They won't sell to any US investors. It's already happening. To my surprise, this was about a month ago, the SEC lawyer who was very nice and very careful and very credible, came from Wachtell Lipton, one of the best law firms in the world. She said, she seemed very surprised that that was happening. So there was this dialogue back and forth. You're in the audience, I'm the SEC lawyer, where not me, but she was saying basically, are you sure? Because they can sell to US accredited investors and institutions, and he's like, but they're not. So we already have innovation being shipped overseas. It's gonna continue unless, like Nancy said, there's a way forward where these 80-some-year-old plus laws are either refreshed or updated, or there's a new agency that is more better able to handle this.
Actually, they have been updated already, right? They were updated in 2012 with the Jobs Act. I don't understand why this panel not one of you has mentioned anything about Reg A Plus.
That was actually my question.
Well, Reg A Plus is in,
That's okay. That was my question, is just why doesn't Reg A Plus solve this?
so because there are currently, to our understanding, about 20 sitting at the SEC right now. They've not signed off on one of them yet. The biggest holdup is, great, you have a security token. How do you trade it? So in order to be traded on a securities exchange, you need to have a transfer agent, and you need to have an exchange that's actually going to do that. So none of that's been worked out. That's part of the conversation with them too.
Why not trade it on an ATS or a broker-dealer? And as far as a transfer agent, if you can't handle the security, if only we had a self-executing automated technology that allowed people to trade on their own. Does it sound like something that's in a blockchain already?
And by the way, Tim will be giving a
Why
keynote
don't you
later
apply
today.
to the SEC and talk to them about this? Right now, there's no ATS or securities exchange that has been approved by the SEC to trade these things. So I agree, if that, you have other issues with Reg A Plus, but it's certainly a path in the interim that you could take, assuming the SEC ever decides to sign off.
I was actually going to ask a similar question to what was just asked, but I'll kind of rephrase. So, two parts. The first is you talked about Chairman Clayton back when he was in front of Congress saying that every token offering he's seen is a security. But recently, actually, at a talk at Princeton, he kind of, again, made it a little bit more gray area by implying that it can move to or from, a utility token. He even brought up the laundromat token example. So, first of all, as far as utility tokens, how do you see that developing with the SEC? And then second of all, since the security token model has already been question has already been asked, what do you think about some of the exchanges that are attempting to register with the SEC, like T0? Now Coinbase is apparently in talks with the SEC as well. So utility token and then the actual exchanges to trade these security tokens. Thank you.
I think the SEC and Dana should talk, right? Because they have this ad tech token that to me sounds like a bona fide utility token that is probably not a security at all. So that's a very good example of something that, if it's done right, is not a security.
So again, the SEC needs to be educated on the utility token concept. Again, they're at the beginning stages of this, and I don't think they fully appreciate the just what this technology can do, and they don't understand how crypto really impacts blockchain technology. Even the chairman said, "Oh, we don't disagree that the technology is great." Well, it functions using crypto, and you can't dissect them. So it's going to be a long process. I think it's going to be a couple of years before we get comfortable doing these things again.
I think that was pretty evident this past week with the Zuckerberg testimony and everything, the questions that were being asked. There were some that, have been around for a while, you just go, like my dog does, but yeah.
All right, let's give him a round of applause again. Thank you, guys.